Assalamualaikum. Today, our group would like to present about the HACCP Decision Tree. Now, let's move on to the first part, which is the terminologies. The first one is the microbiological hazard, which are the microorganisms that are introduced to food that can cause illness or injury. They include bacteria, viruses, and parasites. The sources of microorganisms can be from the air, water, soil, animals, inadequate sanitation practices, and cross-contamination during transportation, handling, processing, and also storage. The next one is microbiological critical control point. It is defined as points, procedures, or steps which can be controlled to prevent, eliminate, or reduce food safety hazard to acceptable level. It is any stage in the food production, such as raw materials, harvesting, transportation, processing, and storage. If the CCPs are not applied as control steps, that product is potentially unsafe. Risk or severity score and decision tree used to determine CCP. Microbiological in CCP are the steps taken to prevent possible contamination of microorganisms at certain temperature, places, and conditions from the beginning till the end of the food processing. The third one is the microbiological critical limit. It is the maximum or minimum value to which biological parameter must be controlled at critical control point to prevent, eliminate, or reduce to an acceptable level. A critical limit is used to distinguish between safe and unsafe operating conditions at a CCP. Last one is morbid obesity. It is the condition where individual's body mass index (BMI) which is 40 kg per meter square or more, or 35 or more than that, facing obesity-related health conditions such as high blood pressure or diabetes. Okay, this is the menu for morbid obesity. Our group chose morbid obesity in order to plan the healthy menu diet. Now let's look at the breakfast. The first choice is brown rice with scrambled egg, and the second choice is mee kuning with soy sauce and fish balls. Okay, the next one is lunch. Lunch, for the first choice, we have grilled turkey stick with quinoa and pita veggie, and the second choice we have brown rice and turmeric chicken with tom yum. Now, for the next one, which is dinner, we have brown rice and salmon fajita.
This is the first menu for breakfast, brown rice with scrambled egg. The menu includes 1 cup brown rice, 1 whole egg, 1 slice of honeydew, and 1 glass of low-fat milk. This is the flow for scrambled egg. This is the HACCP Decision Tree. The first question is there a hazard at this process step? If yes, is control measure necessary at this step for safety? If yes, is the step specifically designed to eliminate or reduce the likely occurrence to an acceptable level? If yes, it is considered as CCP. This is the HACCP Decision Tree for frying. The cutting is considered as CCP. Biological hazard might occur if the chopping board and knife used to cut the raw ingredients have been used to cut other wet ingredients, such as chicken, which contains salmonella enteritis. Cutting is considered as CCP is to prevent the food from contaminated with bacteria from other sources. The hazard could be reduced to the acceptable level for further usage. Second CCP is frying. Salmonella is a common biological hazard that presents in egg. So, the eggs are cooked at high temperature. The high temperature and duration used during frying can reduce the hazard to an acceptable level. This is the flow for steamed brown rice. So, the steaming is considered as CCP. Bacillus cereus is a common biological hazard that presents in rice. The brown rice used steaming under pressure. To ensure the rice cooked thoroughly, the high temperature and duration used during steaming can reduce the hazard to an acceptable level. The next one is fresh milk. The CCP for fresh milk is at during storage. Clostridium thyrobitiricum is a potential biological hazard that presents in milk. The storage should be below 7 degrees Celsius for a duration in between 1 to 5 days. The low temperature and duration for storage can lower the risk for milk spoilage due to the hazard occurrence. The next one is honeydew. The CCP is applied during cutting. The biological hazard may occur if the chopping board and knife used to cut the raw ingredients have been used to cut other wet ingredients, such as chicken which contains salmonella enteritis. This is to prevent the food from contaminated with bacteria from other sources. The hazard could be reduced to the acceptable level for further usage. Okay, the last one is HACCP plan. For the scrambled egg, the cutting process. The critical limit, use clean cutting board. For the procedure, remove the dirt or leftover before using. It should be done regularly by the quality assurance. The corrective actions is clean and wash the cutting board after every use. For the preventive measure, use separate color-coded cutting board for different food groups. For the frying process, cook at 21 centigrade for about 4 minutes. Use food cooking thermometer to monitor the oil temperature and use cooking timer to monitor the time during frying. It should be done regularly by the cooker operator. For the corrective action, adjust fryer temperature and appropriate time. The preventive measure, cover the pan with a pan lid for thorough cooking. The next one, steam brown rice. For the steaming process, for the critical limit, it should be at 60 centigrade for 65 to 70 minutes. Use food cooking thermometer to monitor the temperature constantly and use cooking timer to monitor the time when steaming. The frequency should be continuous with visual check every 10 minutes by the cooker operator. If anything happens, adjust steamer temperature and appropriate time. For the preventive measure, use steaming pressure cooker for thorough cooking. The next one is milk. The storage step. For a critical limit, the temperature should be below 7 centigrade for a duration in between 1 to 5 days. Use cold storage thermometer to maintain the temperature from time to time, at least every 4 hours during operation by the quality control. For the corrective action, adjust cooler temperature or correct problem identified. For the preventive measure, use the raw products within a short time period. The last one is honeydew, the cutting process. For the critical limit, use clean cutting board. For the procedure, remove the dirt or leftover before using. It should be done regularly by the quality assurance. For the corrective action, clean and wash the cutting board after every use. For the preventive measure, using separate color-coded cutting board for different food groups.
The second menu for breakfast is mee kuning with soy sauce and fish balls. This is the full set for the menu, which is 1 bowl of mee kuning with soy sauce and fish balls, 1 serving of papaya and 1 glass of organic aloe vera juice. We move to the next, which is 1 bowl of soy sauce noodles with fish balls. We divide this cooking process for this menu into two, which is first we are going to cook the soy sauce and noodles, and the next we cook the soup for the noodles. Let's say, this is the diagram, the flowchart for the cooking process. This is for the soup. And this is the decision tree to identify the critical control point for each cooking process. So the first question asked was, do preventive measure exist at this step or subsequent steps for the identified hazard? The answer is yes, and we move to the next question. The next question asked is, does this step eliminate or reduce the likely occurrence of a hazard to an acceptable level? If the answer is yes, this is a critical control point. And if the answer is no, we move to the third question, which is, could contamination with identified hazards occur in excess of acceptable levels, or could this increases to an acceptable level? So if the answer is yes, the question 4 will ask, will subsequent step eliminate identified hazard or reduce the likely occurrence to an acceptable levels? And if the answer is no, this is a critical control point. We are going to identify the hazard, severity, and control measure for each steps. Okay, so the first CCP is boiling process. Hazards going to occur at this step is bacterial pathogen under biological class, and the severity for these hazards is high. The control measure should be taken is effective thermal processing used to kill pathogens. The next CCP is CCP2, which is cutting process. It is also the same hazards as the first CCP, which is bacterial pathogen under biological class. The severity is high and the control measure is effective cleaning and sanitizing procedures. The third CCP is boiling because it is also the same as the CCP1 because the CCP3 is under the soup process and the CCP1 is for the soy sauce and the noodles process. It is the same, it is similar with each other. For this process, it is similar with each other. And lastly, CCP4 is plating process. The hazards going to occur at this process is foreign materials, which is under physical class. So the severity is low and the control measure is eliminate potential sources of physical hazards. Next, we move on to the critical limit and monitoring. So the first CCP is boiling process. The critical limit is minimum temperature of water should be 100 degrees Celsius. The monitoring process is what should we monitor is food temperature and cook time. How can we monitor this process is by continuous temperature recording, and how frequent we should monitor this process is by continuous temperature monitoring with hourly checks for the temperature. And who is responsible for this monitoring process? It is the cooking operator team. And the second CCP is cutting, which is the critical limit is have separate cutting board in the kitchen. And what should we monitor is the cutting board and the knife. And how can we monitor this step is by labeling each the cutting board for the specific ingredients to be cut. And how frequent we should monitor this process is before cooking and cutting process. Who is responsible for this cutting process? It is cutting operator team. So the CCP3 is similar as CCP1 and the CCP4 is plating process. The critical limit is cover all the finished products of the food. So the monitoring process is what should we monitor in this plating process is finished products of the food and the cutlery going to be served. Okay, how can we monitor this process? Wipe any foreign material from the cutlery and fully cover the foods after the foods are done being cooked. And how frequent we should monitor this by before and after we are going to serve the food to the patients or the consumers. Who are responsible for this? It is the serving team. Next, we move on to the corrective action and preventive measure. So the first CCP is boiling steps. So the first CCP is boiling process. The corrective action should be taken is the temperature is less than or not reaching 100 degrees Celsius, then the processing line is stopped until the temperature reach 100 degrees Celsius. Affected product is recooked or destroyed. The preventive measure is temperature control. The next step is CCP2, which is cutting process. The corrective action should be taken is specify each cutting board and knife in the kitchen for different type of ingredients. If there is only one cutting board, make sure that there is time gap between wet and dried ingredients before use. Cut the animal products first. So for this corrective action for the cutting process, for example, like the kitchen, maybe can specify the cutting board by different color of cutting board for each different ingredients, or they can label the cutting board for each ingredient going to be cut for the each specific cutting board. Okay, so the preventive measure for this step is personal hygiene and cooking utensils cleanliness. For the CCP3, it is the same as the first point, which is the CCP1. And the fourth CCP is plating process. The corrective actions should be taken is make sure that there is no other material like hair, stones, or dirt or other foreign materials in the food before serving. If there is unwanted foreign materials, the food should not be served to the patients. If the foreign materials are not harmful enough to the patients, we can, and it is easily to separate. We can just take the foreign materials and throw it, and we can serve the foods normally to the patients. The preventive measure for these steps is cutlery cleaning program and personal cautious. Next is one serving of papaya. As you can see for the flowchart on the slide, I can determine two CCP point and one CP point for each process. Okay, this is the decision tree of papaya. It is the same as the mee kuning noodles with soy sauce and fish balls. Okay, we move on to the next slide. We're going to discuss the hazard, severity, and the control measure for each step. The first step is cutting process, which is identified as the CP1. The hazards for this step is bacterial pathogen under biological class. The severity is high, and the control measure is effective cleaning and sanitizing procedures. This next CCP is plating. It is the hazards that can occur at this step is foreign materials, which is under physical class. The severity is low compared to the first CCP, and the control measure is eliminate potential sources of physical hazard. Next, we move on to the critical limit and monitoring. So the first CCP is cutting process. The critical limit is have separate cutting board in the kitchen. The monitoring process and what should we monitor is the cutting board and the knife. How can we monitor this is by labeling each of the cutting board for specific ingredients to be cut. How frequent we should monitor this before cooking and cutting process, and who is responsible for this monitoring? It is the cutting operator team. So the next CCP is plating. The critical limits is cover the fresh cut fruits. What should we monitor is the fruits that are already cut and the cutlery that are going to serve the fruits. How can we monitor this? By wiping any foreign material from the cutlery and fully cover the fruits. How frequent we should monitor this? Before and after we are going to serve the foods to the patients. Who is responsible for this monitoring process? It is the serving team. Next, we move on to the corrective actions and preventive measures. So for the first CCP, which is the cutting process, the corrective action that should be taken, it is specify each cutting board and knife in the kitchen for different type of ingredients. If there is only one cutting board, make sure there is time gap between wet and dried ingredients before use. It is advised to cut the animal products first because animal products tend to have bacterial pathogen more than fruits or vegetables ingredients. The preventive measure is personal hygiene and cooking utensil cleanliness. Next is plating process. The corrective action that should be taken is make sure that there is no other material like hair, stones, dirt, or other foreign materials in the food before we serve the food. Make sure we can fully cover the fruits, the fresh cut fruits with cling wrap before we are going to serve to the patients. Or maybe we can cling wrap the fruits and serve just like that to the patients, and the patients can open it by themselves. That is much more safer. And the preventive measure is cutlery cleaning program and personal cautions. Next is 1 glass of organic aloe vera juice. As you can see in this flow chart, there is no CCP determined because this juice is directly purchased from supermarket and directly served to the patient.
The next meal for lunch is grilled turkey stick with quinoa and feta veggie. The ingredients are 3 ounce grilled turkey stick, half cup cooked quinoa, 1 cup of tomato cherries and chopped cucumber, 2 tablespoons of feta cheese, 1 tablespoon of celery salt, and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And the beverage is 8 ounces of green tea. The first part is the flowchart of each types of food. It shows the basic flow of food processing, starting from the receiving till the display cone. For each flowchart, the CCP and CP are identified. Basically, CCP involved in timing and also temperature. The next part is decision tree. I will explain briefly about this. First, identify any hazard involved in the food processing. If yes, is there any preventive measure to control the hazard? And if yes, is the control likely help in reducing or eliminate hazard? If the answer is yes to, it means that the process is CCP. But what if there is no hazard? Of course, it will not be considered as CCP. And if there is no preventive measure exists too, again, it is not considered as CCP also. The third part is the explanation of each decision tree in food processing. I'm going to highlight on the hazards involved and also the control measure taken. For quinoa, during storage, which is in the ambient condition, make sure it is stored in dry, well-ventilated conditions and use a covered storage container to avoid pathogens like Bacillus cereus, foreign and also chemical materials. For cooking, which is the boiling method, make sure that the water is boiled in proper time and also temperature range. Together with the proper cleaning and maintenance, use potable water treatment control and record to avoid the survival of the pathogens, contamination from poorly maintained equipment, and also from the highly chlorinated water. During display cool, make sure that the quinoa is held for a limited period to avoid the food poisoning bacteria from growing. Next one, turkey. During receiving, make sure that the turkey is delivered chilled or frozen, wood covered and protected to avoid the growth of food poisoning bacteria or physical contamination. During storage, make sure it is stored in the freezer at temperatures that inhibit bacterial growth and use covered storage container to avoid pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, and S. aureus, together with the foreign or chemical materials. For defrosting, make sure to defrost the food under temperature control conditions, for example, inside the fridge. Separation of raw and cooked foods, covering the foods to avoid pathogens, foreign, and also chemical materials. During cooking, which is the grilling method, make sure grill the turkey as per supplier instructions, which is must hot enough. Use the sound equipment too to avoid any survival of the germs and also contamination from poorly maintained equipment. The next one, ingredients for grilling, which is olive oil and celery salt. This one is just the same like quinoa. Next, ingredients for mixing, cherry tomatoes, cucumber, and feta cheese. During receiving, make sure that these ingredients are delivered chilled or frozen, food covered and protected to avoid growth of food poisoning bacteria or physical contamination. During storage, make sure it is stored in the chiller for cherry tomatoes and cucumber, stored in the freezer for feta cheese, and use a proper storage setting to avoid pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, and S. aureus, and also foreign or chemical materials. During defrosting, for feta cheese only, make sure it is defrosted under temperature control conditions, which is in the fridge. And we know that cheese is a potential allergen, so we need to apply the correct level to prevent any inadvertent consumption of allergen by the consumer. The last one, which is the green tea. During mixing, make sure that the water is boiled in proper time and temperature range. Water treatment control and record should be done too, to avoid any pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, and S. aureus, and also highly chlorinated water. Now, let's move on to the hazard plan. We are going to look at the critical limit, monitoring, corrective actions, and also the preventive measure. Quinoa, for storage, the critical limit is the absence of contamination, the monitoring procedure, inspection of storage container, and also surrounding structure, regular pest control inspection, check date codes. It should be done regularly by the quality assurance. When there is anything wrong with the storage, repair or replace defective storage containers or structure. Call in the specialist pest control to get rid of the pests identified. Dispose out of date code stock. Make sure use proper storage container. For cooking, which is boiling, the temperature should be more than 75 degrees Celsius for 20 to 60 minutes. Use sound equipment with 200 ppm chlorine water. The monitoring procedure, check boiler temperature, inspection of equipment, inspection of chlorine water storage. It should be done for each boiling batch by the quality control manager and assistant, which is already trained. If there is anything wrong with the boiling, set the CCP range to the boiler source. Make sure you use proper boiling utensils. For display, maximum 4 hours for more than 8 degrees Celsius. The monitoring procedure, visual check, and time service. It should be done every service by the quality control, and discard the food if it is from the refrigerator. Display within the required period. Turkey. For receiving, the critical limit for frozen food is at or below the 15 degrees Celsius. Record the delivery temperature. It should be done for each delivery by the quality assurance. If there is anything wrong with the receiving, reject the delivery, and inform the supplier. Make sure the temperature is controlled. For storage, the turkey should be at or below 18 degrees Celsius. The monitoring procedure, freezer temperature is recorded. It should be done twice a day by the quality control. If there is anything wrong with the storage, the temperature is adjusted or the soft frozen food going to be discarded. Make sure the temperature is controlled too. During defrosting, it should be done at or below 8 degrees Celsius. And the monitoring procedure, temperature check of chilled storage, record time and temperature together with the visual inspection. It should be done twice a day and during the day for the visual inspection by the quality control. If there is anything wrong with the defrosting, the fridge adjusted, food moved to the another fridge, or discard any food more than 8 degrees Celsius for longer than 4 hours, and discard when there is any contamination. Sensory measuring of temperature is needed. For cooking, which is grilling, the turkey temperature should be above than 95 degrees Celsius for about 10 to 15 minutes. Use a calibrated thermometer and a temperature coding load. It should be done every batch by the quality control. If there is anything wrong with the grilling, cook again pre-cooked turkey until achieve required temperature or all parts are fully cooked. Make sure use specific grilling utensils. For grilling, it's just the same like pingwa. Mixing. During receiving, the chilled food should be at or below 8 degrees Celsius, while the frozen food should be at or below than the 15 degrees Celsius. The monitoring procedure should be recorded for every delivery temperature and should be done for each delivery by the quality assurance and discard if there is any contaminants and make sure to control the temperature. For storage, chill, the temperature should be at or below 8 degrees Celsius. For frozen, the temperature should be negative 18 degrees Celsius. Record the fridge temperature twice a day. Visual check is done during the day by the quality assurance. Make sure the temperature achieves specific requirement and the temperature should be controlled too. For green tea, during mixing, the water temperature should be 100 degrees Celsius for 12 to 15 minutes. Use 200 chlorinated water. Check boiler temperature, inspection of equipment, inspection of the chlorine water range too. It is done each batch of mixing by the quality control manager and assistant. Make sure that the water temperature achieves 100 degrees Celsius and use boiler to boil the water.
My name is Farah. Today I will present lunch menu for this. For the diet modification for morbid obesity, we will have 1 cup of steamed brown rice, 3 mashed bowl of fried turmeric chicken, 1 small bowl of vegetable tom yum soup, 1 piece of orange, and 1 glass 250 ml of even plain water. So let's go to the process and decision tree. For the first one, we will have 1 cup of steamed brown rice. So the process start from the raw brown rice, undergo to washing, which is control point number 1, and next step is steaming, which is CCP1, and last step is plating, which is CCP2. Beside brown rice process, we have decision tree. So for the explanation, first I will explain about the microbial hazard, risk of severity, and control measure for each CCP. For the CCP1, which is steaming process, the hazard is pathogen, which is maybe have insects, cytotoxins, or bacteria. So the class of hazard is biological and the risk of severity is high. So it will be the CCP number 1, and the control measure is effective thermal processing used as a kill step. The CCP2 is plating process. The hazard may be the foreign material such as glass, metal, sticks, and unwanted grades. So the class of the hazard is physical. The risk of severity is low. So it can be the CCP2, and the control measure is eliminating potential source of physical hazard. For the critical limit and monitoring, for the first CCP, which is steaming process, the critical limit is to cook food to a minimum of 74 degrees Celsius, and the monitoring procedure first check the temperature of food every 30 minutes and measure and record internal temperature at the end of the cooking time. The frequency is regularly, and the responsibility is quality control management and assistance. For the CCP2, which is plating process, the critical limit is visual observation and maximum 4 hours at outside. So for the monitoring procedure, we must follow proper hand washing procedures and provide sanitized utensils for serving. The frequency of monitoring is every service, and the responsibility is quality assurance. For the corrective action and preventive measure to each CCP, for the CCP1, which is steaming process, the corrective action is ensure the temperature reach and stay boiling point, which is 100 degrees Celsius, which to eliminate bacteria and brown rice fully cooked. The preventive measures is sensory measuring of temperature. For the plating process, which is CCP2, the corrective action is the wiping down to ensure cleanliness before served to patient. So the preventive measure for CCP2 is cleaning process. Next, 3 measurement of fried turmeric chicken, flow of process and decision tree. For the process, we will have raw chicken and we wash, which is CP1, we wash rapidly with fresh water. Then cooking step, which is CP2, which mix spices using disposable gloves. Next step is marinating process, which is CCP1, and store in the chiller. For the next step is frying process, which is CCP2. We fry in high temperature, and the last step is plating, which is CCP3. So that is the decision tree of fried turmeric chicken. For the explanation, we will have biomicrobiological hazard, risk of severity, and control measure. For the CCP1, which is marinating process, we will have pathogen as hazard, which may have insects, mold, cytotoxin, or bacteria. The class of hazard is biological, which is the risk of severity is high, and it will be the CCP1. So the control measure is storage temperature checked regularly. For the CCP2, which is frying process, the hazard is also pathogen, which may have insects, mold, cytotoxin, or bacteria. The class of hazard is biological and the risk of severity is extreme. It will be the CCP2, and the control measure is effective thermal processing used as a kill step. For the plating, which is the CCP3, the hazard is the foreign materials such as glass, metal, sticks, and unwanted grain. The class of the hazard is physical. It will be CCP3, and the control measure eliminate potential source of physical hazard. For CCP1 marinating process, the critical limit is to avoid cross-contamination during storage and store between 0 and 4 degrees Celsius. For the monitoring, the procedure is to check temperature of cooler twice each shift and monitor storage thermometer in cooler. The frequency of monitoring is regular and the responsibility is quality control management and assistance. For the CCP2, which is frying process, the critical limit is eliminate survival of pathogens during cooking process. Cook the food to a minimum of 74 degrees Celsius. For the monitoring, measure and record internal temperature at the end of the cooking time every 30 minutes, and the frequency of monitoring is regularly, and responsible is quality control management and assistance. For the CCP3, which is plating process, the critical limit is visual observation and the maximum 4 hours at outside. For the monitoring, we have to follow hand washing procedure and provide sanitized utensils for serving. The frequency is every service and the responsibility is quality assurance. For CCP1 marinating process, the corrective action is marinated chicken should be stored in proper temperature, which is 5 to 10 degrees Celsius for chiller, and the preventive measure is sensory measuring of temperature. For the CCP2, which is frying process, the corrective action to ensure the heat of the oil is medium and temperature needs to reach and stay to the chicken fully cooked is 95 degrees Celsius. And the preventive measure for CCP2 sensory measuring of temperature. For the last CCP, which is plating process, the corrective action, the hazard is removed from plate by wiping down to ensure cleanliness before served to patient. The preventive measure for CCP3 is cleaning process. Next, 1 small bowl of vegetable tom yum soup, flow of process. So the vegetable, which is tomato, mushroom, lemongrass, and kaffir lime leaves, cauliflower, and chicken stock, were washed, which repeatedly washed with fresh water, which is CP1. Next process is cutting, which is CCP2. Use clean cutting board. The next step is mixing, which is CP2. The next process is boiling, which is CCP2. Boil with high temperature, and the last step is plating process, which is CCP3. So beside of flow of process, there is decision tree of vegetable tom yum soup. For CCP1, which is cutting process, the hazard is pathogen, and the class of hazard is biological. The risk of severity is high, and it will be CCP1, which is control measure is effective cleaning and sanitizing procedures. For the boiling process, which is CCP2, the hazard is pathogen. Also, class of the hazard is biological, and the risk of severity is medium. It will be CCP2, where the control measure is effective thermal processing used as a kill step. For the plating process, which is CCP3, the hazard is the foreign materials such as glass, metal, sticks, and unwanted grain. The class of hazard is physical, and the risk of the severity is low. It will be CCP3, and the control measure is eliminate potential sources of physical hazard. For the CCP1, which is cutting process, the critical limit is to avoid cross-contamination by food handlers and also visual observation. For monitoring CCP1, the procedure is use clean hands and use sanitized utensils. The frequency of monitoring is every use of cutting board, and the responsibility is quality assurance. For the CCP2, which is boiling process, the critical limit is eliminate survival of pathogens during cooking process, which is 145 Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. The monitoring procedure is measure and record internal temperature at the end of the cooking time, and the frequency of monitoring is regularly, and the responsibility is quality control management and assistance. For the CCP3, which is plating process, the critical limit is the visual observation and the maximum 4 hours at outside. The monitoring procedure is follow proper hand washing procedure and provide sanitized utensils for serving. The frequency of monitoring is every service, and the responsibility is quality assurance. For the CCP1, which is cutting process, the corrective action is food handler must use clean cutting board and ensure the knife that has been used is washed for each vegetable. The preventive measure is personal hygiene and disinfection of equipment. The second CCP, which is boiling process, the corrective action is to ensure the heat of the soup reach the boiling point and the vegetable cooked near end of the cooking. The preventive measure is temperature control. The last CCP, which is plating process, the corrective action is the hazard is removed from the plate by wiping down to ensure cleanliness before serving to patient. The preventive measure for CCP3 is cleaning process. Next, 1 pieces of orange. The flow of process is the raw orange is washed, which is the CCP1, is repeatedly washed with fresh water. Next step is cutting process, which is CCP1, and the last step is plating, which is CCP2. Beside the flow of process, there is the CCP3 for the orange. For the CCP1, which is cutting process, the hazard is pathogen, which is the class of hazard is biological and the risk of severity is high. It will be the CCP1, and the control measures is effective cleaning and sanitizing procedures. For the CCP2, which is plating process, the hazard is the porous material, such as glass, metal, sticks, and unwatered grains. The class of the hazard is the physical, and the risk of severity is low. And it will be the CCP2. The control measure is eliminate potential source of physical hazard. For the CCP1, which is cutting process, the critical limit is to avoid cross-contamination by food handlers and visual observation. The monitoring procedure is use clean hands and use sanitized utensils. The frequency of monitoring is every use, and the responsibility is the quality assurance. For the CCP2, which is plating process, the critical limit is the visual observation and the maximum 4 hours at the outside. The monitoring procedure is to follow proper hand washing procedures and provide sanitized utensils for the serving. And the monitoring every serving, and the responsibility is the quality assurance. For the CCP1, which is cutting process, the corrective action is food handler must use clean cutting board and ensure the knife that has been used is washed for each time. The preventive measure is personal hygiene and disinfection of equipment. For the CCP2, which is plating process, the corrective action is the hazard is removed from plate by wiping down to ensure cleanliness before served to patient. The preventive measure for CCP2 is cleaning process. Next is 1 glass 250 ml of even plain water flow process. The even plain water will serve in the packaging, in the his packaging, which is the CP1. There are no CCP, so there will no decision tree for the even plain water. For the CP1 at the packaging of even plain water, the target hazard as procedure of physical, the responsibility for ensure safety of food by reserving with closed bottle cap to avoid contamination. So, as I said earlier, there are no CCP, so there will no decision tree. That's all
The
from
menu
me.
for dinner
Thank
is
you.
brown rice with salmon fajita. This is the complete set menu for dinner, which are half cup of cooked brown rice, 1 serving of sweet pan salmon fajita balls, 1 whole green apple, and 1 glass of pasteurized low-fat milk. This is the flow of cooking cooked brown rice. And this is the decision tree of cooked brown rice. The question 1 is yes because of biological hazards such as Bacillus cereus can exist in the cooked rice. Question 2 is yes to cooking at proper temperature and adequate time. Question 3 is yes by cooking brown rice to high temperature for a long time can reduce risk of foodborne illness caused by Bacillus cereus. This is the flow of cooking sheep pan salmon vegetables, and this is the decision tree for sheep pan salmon vegetables. Question 1 is yes because of biological hazards such as Salmonella species can live in raw salmon. Question 2 is yes to baking at proper temperature and adequate time. Question 3 is yes baking to adequate temperature can minimize hazard to lower level. This is the flow of serving whole grain apple and also pasteurized low-fat milk. This is the decision tree for pasteurized low-fat milk. Question 1 is yes because of biological hazard from harmful pathogens such as mosquito species. Question 2 is yes through storage at proper temperature. Question 3 is yes by storage at suitable temperature can reduce occurrence of hazard to acceptance level. This table explains the severity of hazard and control measures that need to be taken. For HACCP number 1, which is for cooking method, the hazard can come from biological. The severity of hazard is high. The presence of hazard will cause hospitalization of those affected. The control measures that need to be taken are temperature control and duration of cooking. For HACCP number 2, which is for baking, the hazard can come from biological. The severity of hazard is high. The presence of hazard will cause hospitalization of those affected, especially in elderly or medically compromised, and also in infants and young children, which because of undeveloped immune system. The control measures that need to be taken are temperature control and duration of baking. For HACCP number 3, which is for storage, the hazard can come from biological. The severity of hazard is high. The presence of hazard will cause hospitalization of those affected, especially in elderly or medically compromised, and also in infants and young children, which because of undeveloped immune system. The control measures that need to be taken are temperature control and time control. This table explains the hazard plan for the menu. For HACCP number 1, which is for cooking method, the hazard can come from biological. The critical limits are temperature need more than 60 degrees Celsius and also time to cook more than 45 minutes. The monitoring procedure need to be taken by checking internal temperature by using thermometer and also visual inspection of texture cooked rice. The procedure need to be taken regularly every 30 minutes by quality control team. The corrective action that can be taken are by cooking food at temperature more than 60 degrees Celsius, increase duration of cooking to ensure rice fully cooked, use quick etching method to cook foods below 45 degrees Fahrenheit within 4 hours of preparation. Preventive measures that can be taken are by avoid preparing food too far in advance of planned service, avoid holding cooked food at room temperature, reheat foods rapidly to 165 degrees Fahrenheit or above, hold or store hot food above 150 degrees Fahrenheit until served. Next, for HACCP number 2, which is for baking method, the hazard can come from biological. The critical limit is fully cooked salmon at oven temperature of 125 degree to 140 degree Fahrenheit, and also time to cook between 12 to 14 minutes. The preventive measure that can be taken are by preventing post-cooking cross-contamination, prohibiting people who are ill or are carrier of salmonella from working in food operation, and also holding chilled seafood below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And lastly, for HACCP number 3, which is for storage, the hazard can come from biological. The critical limit is refrigerator temperature should be 5 degrees Celsius or below. The monitoring procedure need to be taken is by record time and temperature for every 1 hour by quality assurance team. The corrective action that can be taken is by refrigerated meat product at temperature of 5 degrees Celsius or below, or throw out unsafe meat product to consume. The preventive measures that can be taken are by prevent cross-contamination with raw product and also use meat product in 3 days.
Last but not least, HACCP system is important to be applied for food handler in order to reduce potential hazards including biological, physical, chemical and allergens. People who work in preparing food should alert with food safety, especially when working in the hospital. Prioritize patients' health and work meticulously to avoid serious health problems within the patients. HACCP system include conducting a hazard analysis to identify hazards and the needed controls, critical control points, critical limit for each control point, monitoring procedures, corrective action procedures, verification procedures, establishing documentation procedures and records, and verification that the system is properly applied. That's all from us. Thank you.